We see your screen.
Thank you. Yeah, just now, I was reflecting on a lot of things. As you know, we study about a lot of clinical trials, how we try and improve survival and so on. And these are huge, huge advances in medicine. And I always recall what Dr. Marino often says, we are providing disease care, not sure we are providing health care. So healthy and being unhealthy are two different disease states of a human body. And we seem to be very good, and we are making rapid progress in taking care of diseases. But when it comes to healthcare as a society, we could be doing much better. So we are dealing with the consequences rather than the prevention. And I was reflecting on it. And the other criticism I often hear from non-oncologists is, well, you're getting a 2, 3 month survival with this $1 million treatment. And they often fail to see the value proposition and all that. As an oncologist, struggling to make patients live longer, getting 2 or 3 months to some form of targeted therapy is very meaningful in my mind. But I can also see from the other hand why 2 to 3 months cost so much money and effort, and is there value and all that. So I was reflecting on all that, and I said, look, what is it that we can do as a practice to help the lives of our patients? We all, at the end of the day, we want people to live as long as they can. And during all the time, we want them to be as healthy as they can be. Really, a frailty and health issue shouldn't last for more than a very few weeks and at the end of life. Until then, all of us should be able to live a very healthy, productive, and a long life. And as I was reflecting on how to accomplish the goal and more impactful, I just went back to the basics. And I said, we're all born with certain genetics that is hard to change. We can change gene expression by our behavior, but the fundamental genetics itself, we can't change. And the other thing is there are extraneous factors that we cannot influence. The type of environment we are born in, or as the environment around us changes, we can influence it by policy matters and being a good citizen and all that. But as an individual level, it's hard. But where we could have a huge impact in how we manage our own health, and hopefully we don't land in a disease state as much, or if we do land, then how do we manage it from there on, is the kind of things that are well within our control, which is really diet, exercise, and stress management. And if we all could do that, and advise our patients to do that, I think we would have a healthier society, lower healthcare cost, and really be more productive and more impactful. To this end, I was reflecting on how can we accomplish this? If I'm going to tell my patient to do something, have I ever tried using the same advice on myself? So, and then just going through the thought experiment, that exercise in my mind said is what prompted me to come up with this idea for the talk. Okay. And I'm just going to be interactive with the first 5, 10 minutes, and then we'll talk about what this is all about, and I will explain that in a moment. So the first thing I would like all of us to do, and this is called the DASH eating plan, and this comes from recommended by the American Heart Association. And this DASH stands for Dietary Approaches to Stopping Hypertension. As you know, one of the largest, the most, let me phrase it, hypertension is a silent killer. Most people with high blood pressure may not even know it, but it leads to all sorts of cardiovascular, renal, as well as cerebrovascular disease, which is the highest cause of mortality across the world. If we have 8 billion people on this planet, or 4 billion of them will die from these causes. And a lot of that is led by hypertension. And one way hypertension can be managed is by having a good eating plan. And what I'm showing here is the DASH eating plan. And I'm just going to zoom in on the figure here in a moment, and then I will zoom in on the actual quantity. So what AHA tells us is there are a variety of dietary plans. So one can choose what they want, but this is recommended by a good source, American Heart Association. So we'll stick with it for now. This is what they say that they encourage us to eat. You could see here vegetables, fruits, whole grains, fat-free or low dairy products. So it's okay to have milk products, but try and make it fat-free or low dairy, fish and poultry, beans, nuts and seeds, and vegetable oils. Okay, so this is what they encourage us to eat. And this is what they want us to limit as using, which is fatty meats, full dairy products, sugar, sweetened beverages, sweets, and sodium intake. And we often talk about sugar and carbohydrates and fat, and we often lose the importance of sodium intake. Now, on this side of the screen, this tells us what is the recommended daily serving. So, if we are going to grains are good, the rule of thumb is 4 to 5 servings of fruits and vegetables are good. Go for low fat diet. And and the sodium, they give us a weekly recommendation. The recommended thing is 2,300 milligrams, but if we can get it down to 1,500 milligrams, that's even better. Okay, and then if we are going to eat animal products such as meat, poultry, and fish, make it more of poultry and fish and less of fatty or red meat. And I think that's becoming clearer again and again. And there's now data, even poultry and fish, there could be some challenges. But given that most of the people in our society, this is their diet, just requesting them to cut down on red meat might be a good start. Okay, instead of asking people to go to entirely a plant-based diet, that may be harder for most of us to do. And then the DASH eating plan also recommends low in saturated and trans fats. Take food that's rich in potassium, calcium, magnesium, fiber, and protein. And calcium and is for bone health. Magnesium and potassium is for cardiac health, and fiber is for bowel health, and protein is for muscle health. So, and then these are good things to have in your diet. And a lot of these can be had by using fresh vegetables. For example, if you take a banana a day, that has a lot of potassium in it. Nuts have a lot of calcium in it. Milk, low-fat milk has a lot of calcium in it. So there are a variety of sources that we could do and cut down on sodium. I mean, the major challenge is, processed food, a bag of chips. And if we go to business dinners and business lunches, I see this all the time, even in healthcare dinners. There's a big box of a chip packet there. Even though they may be baked rather than fried, they still have salt, and salt is a big problem, can lead to hypertension, and hypertension can lead to increase in cardiovascular and other mortality. Now, what I would like you to do, the interactive portion is, this is just to give you a bird's idea. I want each of you now to think back to the last 48 hours. Okay. And then this is quasi-scientific. You don't have to get too precise with all the scoring models. I would just want you to reflect in your own mind. And if you have a pen and paper, just write down what did your diet look like in the last 48 hours. Okay. And then we'll come back and then we will give this a score in a moment. But I'm going to pause here for about 30 seconds or so, so you have a moment to reflect and write down if you can recall your diet in the last 48 hours. Okay, I hope you found that time to be sufficient. If you'll have a few more minutes to work on it. Now, the next thing I would like you to do is to reflect on the last several days and give yourself a score. Now, what we're going to go through this is there are 8 domains in this score sheet. Again, it's quasi-science. And what I'm trying to get at is, if we are going to ask our patients to do this, I think it's important that we practice this ourselves in our lives because it does 2 things. First, it'll help us to lead a healthier and a longer life, so that we do not, it's good for us, we do not become a burden to ourselves, to the society, to our families, because we have done the best we can to take care of ourselves. Okay. And in order to do that, we just need to be able to score. And as you go through this exercise, maybe we learn something about ourselves. And we might also be a lot more empathetic towards our patients because we can then see what the kind of challenges they may face in altering their lifestyle and behavior. So now, based on the diet, on your reflection for the last 48 hours, just give yourself some form of a scoring point. Just for example, if you really didn't have any ice cream in the last 2 days, or you didn't really go for any red meat, and you like a lot of fruits and vegetables, you can score yourself 100 points. If you had taken a little bit of ice cream or went to fatty diet and things like that, maybe 80 points. If you had taken red meat or really that kind of diet, I would put it more in the 25th percentile if you fall in the middle. So just give yourself some score. And we're going to go through 8 domains here. And the next thing I want you to think about is think of the last week or last 2 weeks and how much physical activity did you do? and and this is more than 150 minutes. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean you should have been in the gym in 50 minutes. If you come to work and you walked fast, or you took a flight of stairs when you're at work, and just add all those things up. And even if it's say 5, 10 minutes in a day, 15 minutes in a day, and that can add up over a week time. So I would want you to reflect on it. And if you had been to the gym or did a cardio or ran on the beach or did a treadmill, those are great. And I think then it's easier if you had been on the treadmill for 30 minutes and you did it 3 times a week, plus you walked all the way around. I think that's plenty of exercise, more than 150 minutes. So I want you to reflect on the amount of exercise you had in the last week and give yourself a score. The next domain is fairly straightforward. This is with regard to tobacco and nicotine exposure, includes vaping. So you got to see here now. Yeah, this is fairly standardized. Okay. Now, one thing that's evolving now, and I'll talk about the various recommendation by Heart Health Association, is sleep health score. I think it is becoming very clear that having a healthy sleep is vitally important. And in this stone age where there's a lot of work pressure, and then we also have a lot of distractions. We're watching Netflix, we just want to watch that other episode, and we don't want to leave, and we end up binging on it. Ultimately it interferes with your sleep because we have to get to work next day morning or we have commitments. So I want us to reflect on the last week or so and just think of the number of hours on an average you slept per night. And here are the numbers, and you can give yourself some points. The next thing is talked about BMI. Now, BMI is very controversial. This works for most average people, but if somebody is a bodybuilder full of muscle, then their BMI is going to be high in a healthy way. So, notwithstanding the limitations of BMI, this is what the AHA recommends, and you all know your BMI. So, just give yourself a score. Now, several of you might have had your lipid profile checked in the last year or two. It doesn't have to be very accurate. What I'd like you to do, if you can recall, think of your total cholesterol and then minus your high density cholesterol. As you know, the HDL is a good cholesterol, and that can actually be modified by exercise. So people who exercise a lot have higher levels of HDL. So take your total cholesterol, detect your HDL, and then see where your cholesterol score lies. And you can give yourself a score if you can recall your numbers. Again, doesn't have to be very accurate, just broadly. Same thing with your glucose score. Here, they do look at fasting glucose as well as your A1C. As you all know, A1C reflects the last 3 months of control. Fasting is variable. Um, and um, and you can look at it here, and there are scoring systems. If you have the numbers, then you can give yourself a score. If you do not have diabetes or your FTG is less than 100, then you score very high in the scale. Okay. Now, the last one is your blood pressure. And of course, blood pressure is very dynamic. It varies. But we all can check our blood pressure. When you come to work, you can check it yourself, or you can buy a little blood pressure machine that you can have at home and check it often. And so you will have an idea where your blood pressure is. And remember, the blood pressure management has changed. We used to be very aggressive, want to keep treated patients who had blood pressure more than 120. And now we try and up to 140 or 90 seems to be tolerated before we actually start treating it. But do look at, think of your average blood pressure if you have measured it in the last few months, and then give yourself a score. Um, if you're being treated for high blood pressure, then detect 20 points. Okay, if you had a chance to write down all these scores, please add them up and divide them by 8. And that gives you an average score. So now that you know where your score is and why is this important, and that's what I want to talk to you about today. Okay, so we're going to this title the talk leaves Crucial 9, a blueprint for a longer and healthier life. So we just went through the DASH eating plan. This is not a diet, it's a eating plan, and that's what is important. And it's important for us to be aware what is healthy for ourselves and what is healthy for our patients and what's healthy for our community. And this is a very, very highly modifiable factor that we all can make changes that we can influence health of ourselves and people around us. And that's why it's important for us as healthcare providers to be very familiar with this eating plan. We've already gone through an interactive score sheet, and you all have your scores now, you know where you stand. And so what it is the American Heart Association came up with life simple steps, or they came up with 7 points. And then it's a highly validated questionnaire which correlates with a variety of health outcomes, primarily focused on cardiovascular, cerebrovascular. And then more recently, it also correlates with in patients with uh, kidney health, and that's important in what we do. And so we talked about eating better, we talked about being more active, managing our blood sugar, managing our weight, getting our cholesterol under control, managing blood pressure, quitting tobacco. Then they add an eighth one, and that's called the healthy sleep was added to it, and this was called life's crucial eight. Not crucial eight, essential eight. The initial seven was called simple seven. Then they call life's essential eight, and most recently they've added psychological health. There is still ongoing debate with regard to value of this, and I'll show you some data on this. But whether this adds value or not is unclear at this point. But the AHA thinks that psychological health becomes important, and how we manage our health and how we feel on a day to day is important. And without getting into too many details, life is what it is. The only thing we can change is our attitude, how we look at it. Because ultimately, we don't want to be mad, we don't want to be angry, we don't want to be miserable, we don't want to be depressed. And these are things that can happen to us either innately, we may not be in the best mood when we wake up, or something is bothering us, or there are things happening around us that we don't have a whole lot of control, but start affecting us. And we have to be mindful of how things are affecting our well being. And this in turn can affect our life longevity and how healthy we feel. And one modifiable factor in all this is our attitude, how we look at it. Put this in long term perspectives, and it'll be easier for us to cope with it. Because ultimately, I don't want to be mad every day. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be miserable or depressed. So I don't want any of those things to happen, that there are forces trying to do this to my mind and my mental health. And we have to be active in managing it. And this is now incorporated in Life's Crucial 9. The next thing I like to do is to share some data with you guys on what this is. Again, this is this is not a critical review. This is not a systematic review. I'm just going to show you some samples why this is important. So so first sample I'm going to show you is why this matters, because nothing changes human behavior like data. So I'm going to hopefully show you some data that will convince you about why these simple things are so powerful and so useful that we can use it for our own lives, and we can then encourage our patients to practice it. And I'm also going to give you some tools and really measurable metrics that we could use to help our patients and ourselves. Okay, so I'm going to talk about two studies now. One is where there are healthy participants in the studies, and the other study I'm going to show you are participants who actually had another new class of disease that's defined by American Heart Association. Is called cardiovascular, renal, and metabolic syndrome. This is a composite health that they've come up with, and I'm going to show you how even with patients who have these problems can be helped by this crucial 9. Okay, so the first data I'm going to show you is from so just like I talked about, initially the Life Simple took 7 domains, and then they came up with Life's Essential when it was 8, which added sleep to it. And the most recent one that I come up with is Crucial 9, which is including mental health in our well-being, something to consider. So this study here looked at 22,000 participants. These were from the NHANES study. This is a longitudinal study of a lot of health practitioners who participate in this study. And they looked at data from 2005 to 2018. Now, what is striking in this study, and what they looked at was they wanted to study, they used a cost proportionalized model, association between the scores of this metric. So they took all these 3 metrics, and then they looked at all cause cardiocerebrovascular disease and cardiovascular disease mortality. And they looked at the predictive performance of these metrics. Now, what I wanted to point out here is these participants were fairly young, only about 45 years of age, and then equally distributed between a male and female. The median follow-up was fairly short. So whatever impact we are seeing is huge here, because 8-year follow-up is not a long follow-up in somebody's lifetime. But nevertheless, that's what this data is about. And within that short follow-up, 6.6% of patients of this participant died. And you can see here about a quarter of them actually died from cardiocerebrovascular disease. And then maybe another quarter of them died from cerebrovascular disease. So you can see these are major causes of death. And in a population that's only 45 years old, and they have been followed up for a medium period for follow up for 8 years, we have had about 6 to 7% of these people die. Okay, so that's a lot of death in this otherwise healthy cohort, and you can see the reason for this death. Okay, so now what I want to show you is some of the data. So basically, what they did in this graph, I'm going to see that I can now break it bolder. So what they've shown us here is they took the simple score, they took the 8 score, and the crucial 9 score. And all these scores tell us as your score increases, the risk of dying. So this is now there was another graph here. Let me see whether I can get that graph. There was this is Pearson correlation, that all these scores correlate well with each other. So it doesn't really matter which score you use, it's good. And then they looked at this is the one, this is the hazard ratio, and there was another paper that actually looked at 1,000% years. But you can look at it. I think what's important is as the scores increase, the hazard ratio, the risk of dying from in the next 78 years decreases significantly. Now, I just want us to put this in perspective, and I want us to reflect on some of my opening comments. We take care of patients with complex stone disease, complex urological problems, advanced cancers, and so on and so forth. Anything we do can improve it. But I'm not sure any of those would be as powerful as this, where you can reduce, say, if we look at this data set and we say in the next 8 years, there's a 7% chance of dying. And then if I'm able to do something with the score and I'm able to reduce it, or increase it, say from 50 to 80. These are all that can be easily achieved. All that we need to do is to reduce the BMI or change the diet. And this in turn will affect your blood pressure. And that's all it is. It'll affect your cholesterol. And we can see how all of this are connected by doing something as simple, just asking people to reduce their weight when you talk to them, or advising them to watch their blood pressure, get it under good control. I mean, simple things can reduce the risk of death, say from 7%, it can, or 7% risk of dying to 2 to 3%. And that's a huge advantage. And if you put this at the population level, you can look at the number of years we'll gain by improving the population health. And more importantly, the cost will save for the society and to our system, because there are less hospitalization, less medical cost, they're healthier lives, they're happier, and they become productive members of a society and to their families. So you can see the impact these scores can have on our own lives and lives of our patients. Okay, and they go into a variety of C statistics and all that, and that's not that important. Um, the next data set I want to share with you is the AHA, which is the American Heart Association, has again come up with another very interesting score, because this is they call it the CKM syndrome. So what this stands for is cardio, cerebrovascular, kidney, and metabolic syndrome. So they put all these things together, and a lot of patients do suffer from this syndrome. So this study now included in patients who actually have CKM syndrome, and they looked at those patients and they said, if we are able to modify these scores, what impact would that have on the outcome of those patients? And in this study, they showed that every 10% increase in the crucial 9 score is associated with a 37% risk in the reduction in the risk of progression to advanced CKM stages. And they did very variety of analysis in this, but they looked at variety of parameters that are important. And what they really showed here is they weighted the parameters that actually influence the outcome. And the reason I brought this up is, as I was reading these papers, and I said, I need to be able to tell my patients something and tell myself something that is modifiable, is easily measurable and achievable. And I think that's what we want to do. And as I looked at it, one of the things that were very heavily weighted in their analysis is blood glucose. Now, just think about it. If we ask our patients to avoid sugary beverages, okay, that's a start. Or if we ask them to avoid fruit juices, instead ask them to take whole fruits. For example, somebody enjoys an orange juice, take whole orange, because the way Mother Nature designed it, is she wants us to get a lot of fibers from orange. And if we squeeze the juice out of it and just have the fiber, I don't think humans would like to eat it. That's not how our mouth or taste is trained. Whereas what Mother Nature does is she mixes all this fiber with orange juice so that it makes it very palatable. And that doesn't even include all the micronutrients that go into it, which are really necessary for our good health. Okay. So if somebody enjoys oranges, it's better to go for a whole fruit rather than just juices. Same thing if somebody enjoys an apple flavor. It's good for a whole apple rather than an apple juice. What that will do is will cut down on the sugar rise, that rapid rise, and then most of us are healthy. We can secrete insulin, we can reverse it back, but then some may not be as lucky. And then this sustained level of high glucose can cause to other health issues. And if you look at the other thing, tobacco exposure, this should really go down. So if we hear of any of our patients smoking and all that, it may be worth a moment to talk about smoking cessation, because this is an important factor. Sleep health. And I think this sleep is a product of a variety of things. A lot of this is cultural. And of course, life is full of stresses. So sometimes, but prioritizing sleep. And there are certain behaviors, setting time to go to bed and setting time to wake up is important. And so if we are watching a nice Netflix movie and then it's time to go to bed, either before you start the series or start with, figure out time it properly so that it ends at your bedtime, or somehow you have to have the way to figure out to get to bed on time and not invade on your sleep. And so it's so important. Blood pressure is something all of us can measure at home and continue to have a good idea on it, so we don't necessarily have to go to a doctor's office to do it. And then you can see the physical activity and so on. And there are several other non-scientific and other anecdotal cases where physical activities doesn't have to be going to a fancy gym or doing something strenuous. It's just being regularly active. Just walking itself has so much benefits, and just walking regularly, taking a dog for a walk, or going for a stroll around your neighborhood, or walking on a beach. And we live in such a wonderful city here, that little things like that. And just doing gardening, doing that on a regular basis, squatting as much as you can, or bending forward and stretching ourselves. Things like that can really help us. And then all the other things that go into it. Okay. And then we are all used to seeing Kaplan-Meier curves, and so if this is now this is looking at these curves. There's a legend here that explains what these curves are, and but what this is just looking out in this population, which is high risk because they do have a CKM syndrome. And if you look at the crucial 9 score, so I'm going to zoom in here a little bit, and I will move this up. Okay. Now, if we look at the crucial 9 score and you put them in the fourth quarters, and this is the survival probability, and these are patients followed up for 12, 13 years, you can see patients in the lower quartile, the top quartile really do very well compared to the other quartiles. So just think about this. If we are able to move patients from this quartile to that quartile, we invariably prolong their life. And this is so powerful. This is more powerful than any other treatments that we can come up with for any of the disease states that we have. And even if we do, I'm not so sure we can find a separation like this as consistent as this. And this is why just talking to our patients and then encouraging to monitor lifestyle is so important, which I really think is going to be very, very impactful. I'll go back to our PowerPoint slide. Okay, so the question then is, what does all mean? Why are we talking about this morning, and what can we do? And this is my challenge to all of us. Okay, let's all come up with an action plan. The first thing is, please take care of yourselves, because I think unless we are healthy, we cannot take care of others. So I think it's important, by taking care of ourselves, we allow ourselves to take care of others. And so the first thing is, embed healthier habits in your lifestyle. So whatever that might look, each of us are different, and we just need to be very deliberate and intentional about it, and think of all the habits that we have today and say, what is it we can make minor tweaks to our own habits. That way we can be a little bit healthier. When we do that, we also recognize when we request our patients to do it, some of the barriers they may face. And when we overcome our own barriers, then we get more empathetic towards others and we can help them to navigate their others' barriers in a way that it's doable and achievable. Okay. I know our clinics are very, very busy and we don't have time to go through a lot of lifestyle talk. But I would urge all of us to consider a lifestyle talk at every encounter. Just say, hey, do you exercise regularly? Just go for a walk, do something you enjoy. It's good for you. Little things that they hear from our providers can have a big impact on our patients. We may not be able to measure it with the Kaplan-Meier curve I just showed you, but be assured that we are making a big difference in lives of our patients. Okay. Then, of course, recommend resources because a lot of our patients are not familiar. And it's one thing to say, eat plant-based diet, but it's better to say, look, eat a lot of fruits and vegetables every day, or take a lot of beans and things like that, or cut down on sugary drinks, be very specific and give them resources that they can think. And as physicians, as we get more specialized and more drawn into our area of work, it's very easy to forget the patient as a whole, their social circumstances, where they come from, their background, and so on. Is to really encourage ourselves and be disciplined to think in a more holistic approach. Doesn't matter, everything we say here can be applied to every disease state we see, from cancer to stone disease, to well, it could be ED, it could be incontinence, all the things we can see, a lot of things that we just discussed could be easily applied. And we have to think holistically for our patient. We have to consider the global impact of what we do and how we can help our patients and really plan for long term. And I think if we can do all this and embed this action in our practices, I think we would have a huge impact, and more than anything that we do as a specialist in our field. Okay. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share my thoughts with you guys. And we have a few minutes here. I'll open it up for questions and discussions. Any comments or questions? Okay. If there's none else, I think we can stop here. And all of you have a great week. Thank you.
Dr. Balaji, I
Yes.
just want to say thanks for kind of pointing this out to us, and it's something that I don't do very well at, and I need to pay more attention to. And so I appreciate the reminders from you and also from Dr. Marino. Seems like it happens about every 6 months. One of the faculty is telling me to start living healthier, and I do appreciate it. So thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Tommy. Appreciate it. Okay. Thank you, guys. These are simple enough to do. I think it helps us take care of ourselves. Okay. I think these humanities talks are meant to do this. Is really just not get into the granular technical talks that we normally do. Is to really look, helps us to look at a very broad picture and remind ourselves and our patients. Okay. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. For sure.